Welcome to the Dream On podcast. I am Travis Gentry here with my best friend, my partner, Julia Gentry.
And today it's my turn. I get to ask the question.
Oh yeah, let's do this.
Okay, here's my question. If you could tell your younger self one thing that you know now that you wish you had known back then, what would you tell yourself?
Don't believe anything they say.
Oh my gosh. That's it? That's all you're going to say? For those of you who are just tuning in, we start every podcast with a question. And that could be a big loaded question or just a big loaded short answer. So, anything you're going to add to that?
Do you want me to add to that?
Who's they, first of all?
Anybody. Even you.
It's true. Actually, I am a verbal processor, so Travis has learned that a lot of what comes out of my mouth outside of on stage or on podcasts, all the other things are subject to being true.
Yeah, I could peel it back more, but I think what I've learned is that you look at, Robert Kiyosaki says it, there's a heads, tails, and the center. And so you stand in the middle and you look at both sides objectively or inobjectively. And where I believe our culture has gone is that we're told what to do so much that you stop thinking. And so if I could tell myself not to not believe it, but seek to understand why I would believe what they're saying.
It's so good.
And see if it's the truth for me.
It's funny that you say that, though, because if you really think about some of the major issues, minor and major issues that we as people face right now, I think most of it comes back to this idea that they actually don't know how to think about things because we're only told what to think, to your point. So it's like, here's what to think. And so we're actually not taught as a people and a culture, like, how to think about things. So that's really fascinating.
Well, we're taught how to think about everything. So you go to school.
But I mean, like, no, we're taught what to think.
That's what I'm saying. What to think and how to think it, as opposed to saying, like, sometimes there's different ways to approach it. And so we could go down that. Yeah. That's not the topic today, but that's my answer to your question.
Okay, great. I love it. Here is the topic of today. Actually, it's a 2-part series, and it's just to buckle up, Buttercup, and to sit in the front row of our house and to learn about all the things that have to do with the Gentrys. We actually posted something in our Facebook group, Dream Together, last week. I just said, hey, if we did a podcast and you had questions for us, what would you ask? And we were bombarded with questions. So we're going to take a couple of episodes and we're just going to answer all the questions about life, kids, parenting, homeschool, RV travel, supporting each other's dreams, and everything in between.
Yes, but first, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, us. And Dream, I Dare You.
That's amazing.
So check out this book. They are the sponsor of the video today. It's a great book.
Are you practicing?
No.
Oh, okay. So you did a good job. I actually do want to say thank you to our sponsors. This is a Dare to Dream conference swag only, this Live Free shirt that I'm wearing. I think even someone said, are you going to change your outfit? And I'm like, no, I'm going to wear this every day, all day.
Which is brought to you by the Dream Factory & Co., which is owned by Julia Gentry.
Okay, go. Okay, so here's our first question. Our first question is maybe along the lines of even my question, your answer, is why do we homeschool? Why do we homeschool? Which is a fair question just as is, but then the fact that we have 5 children and we run our own businesses is even a fairer question. So to give some context around, I think that this is a major undertaking as is if you had 1 kid and were not working as a parent, but then we layer in 2 of us running our own businesses and 5 children. Now answer, why are we homeschooling?
Why are we homeschooling? I'll let you go first.
I think for me, I have two trains of thoughts around this. Number 1, the judger in me, if I'm being really honest. I have a lot of judgment against the education system as a whole. I think to your point, if I watch, I think in their defense, we have a system that's designed to do its best to accommodate a lot of different little humans, and they're quote unquote doing the best that they can, right? I don't think it's very individualized for learning styles. I don't think that it is very specific to mindset training. I don't think that it's geared towards heart set training. I don't think that it takes into context any piece of who that individual is in their learning styles, and then it just starts plopping bombs like that little boy's ADD because he won't sit in his chair, and this little person can't read fast enough, and all of a sudden
not that he's eating a bag of Skittles and drinking a Coke.
Totally. On top of he's a little boy trying to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, and so I I'm saying this because there's a lot of me that has these judgers, right, of like that, don't like that, don't like this, don't like that, don't like this, and I think at some level our judgments can help us make a decision that gets us out of bed in the morning, but that's not the reason why I keep homeschooling. So the reason that I keep homeschooling isn't just to spite the system, or like I can do it better, and if they only did it right, like that I think motivated me at first. But as we've navigated this now for the last couple of years, you do realize, like, dang, this is hard. They're my kids, and I still don't know that I always know, like, their learning style, or, that I'm not. So I think that it's gotten me to that decision, but what keeps me going in that decision is a very different answer. But I'm going to pause there because I don't want to trump the whole conversation. So I want to hear what you have to say.
So I would say our kids are going to be influenced by the people and the environments that they're around. And I want to be the biggest influence in our kids. I think school-wise, I think health-wise, when we talk about food and we eat certain things, we're constantly educating them. So school has served its purpose, but I think for us and where we're going in the world in general, and where we are, and what we do and the lifestyle that we live as far as traveling and kind of moving here and there, and it's not conducive. And so I think for us to be able to have that influence and to teach them like 24/7. So we're constantly, like, there's a teaching moment in everything. Yes, there's foundational principles. They need to read and write and do math and all those things and certain histories, and I understand that. But I think that there's so much more that we can start to teach and lay the foundation for our kids that are relative and prevalent today.
Yeah.
Well, and for the future of where they're going and what they really need.
And it's so funny because I think this is one of those topics that this is such a can of worms because you're right, there is a lot. And you have to your point of even going, okay, there's thousands of different curriculums, there's tons of different learning styles, like there's not one size fits all. And so I think that part of my journey and actually feeling like I can do this well is I had to let go of what everything around me was telling me about what my kids should do and how it should look and how it should feel, all the shoulds, that all of a sudden there's this like comparison bar set that I'm supposed to like live into as a mom or a teacher or coach, and my kids are supposed to, that like right out of the gate, that made this so hard. And then I think I had so many friends that kept saying, I'm not a teacher. Well, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a good teacher. And this, but to your point, I think at some level we are our kids' teachers in every minute of every day.
And yes, not just what you're teaching them verbally, but what you're showing them with your actions. And it's so important because what we do and how we do it, they're watching constantly. Like there's certain things that Malachi will bring up that I did. I didn't say anything, but I did it. And then a week later, he asked me why I did that.
Yeah.
So it's another teaching moment, but they're watching you. And that's the great thing. That's such a blessing for us to be able to have them watch us too on what we're doing, when we're working. Why are we working? He'll come in the morning and look at me kind of doing what I'm doing with the stocks, or you're on a podcast or talking to one of your clients, and one of the kids comes in, and so they get to see it real time and see that we're choosing this hard.
Yeah.
It's not always easy, but we're letting them know, like, hey, we choose this and we get to work right now, so we need this space. And so I love that we get to be able to show them that as well throughout the day. Not just drop them off, pick them up. They have no idea what we did throughout the day.
Well, and I think that that's what's kept me going at some level is my end goal is that we've literally created the heart space and the mindset space within our kids to know who they are, to know whose they are, to love learning, right? Like to fall in love with learning and truly to use life as the vehicle to chase their dreams. right? Like, and it was so funny because the other day when Malachi had asked, it was one of those days that it was just like any other kid, like, I don't want to go through the things, and I don't want to do my math again, and I don't want to. And so I just asked him, hey, do you know why we do it in this format? Do you know why we homeschool? And he says, well, I think so. And I said, well, do you want to have that conversation? And he says, yeah. And so I said, hey, buddy, this idea is so that I said, would you want to, get done with school sooner so you can go play outside? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, do you want to choose what you want to learn? Like the things that you're really interested in? He's like, yeah. And I go, okay, so what do you want to learn? He's like, I want to make money like dad. And I was like, I love it. So, okay, let's talk about that. You want to make money like dad? He's like, yeah, I want to be in a business that I can make money like dad whenever I want, like first thing in the morning. And so he starts to unpack this. And I said, okay, great. So what's 4 + 7? And he kind of paused. I said, what's 2 × 2? Kind of paused. I said, you have to learn these baseline numbers then. And then guess what? You go multiply them times 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 or however many zeros you want to put at the end of those. But it doesn't actually get easier to add them with more zeros. It gets harder and more complicated. So if you can learn this baseline, and it was almost like this moment that I got to practice again our why, right? Like, of like, we actually get to choose what we want to do in our life and our career, and this is giving us, and then he got to choose, and he actually like hunkered in, focused in, and it was like, okay, we were up and running.
That's
right?
awesome. That's so cool.
I think that why I say that is because what keeps me going are all of those things, is that we've been gifted, the next generation. I know it sounds cheesy, but you're like the next generation of people, right? And so I think it's important for me to go, I want to play a role in what they're learning and how they view the world, and teaching them how to think about things, and encouraging their gifts, their learning styles, and everywhere in between.
And this has been years in the making. I mean, I think when Malachi was born, that's when we started to talk or kick around different ideas of what we're going to do, and how do we want to see this as we were learning and going through our own process of learning and rethinking and challenging like what we did think in the past. And so I think I just want to say that if you've been on the fence or you're like, well, I can't do that, you can, but it may take some time. It may not happen overnight. You may have to change careers. You may have to change jobs. You may have to work with your spouse and say, hey, I want to homeschool. I need to work part-time or at nights, or you have to adjust where you're at if that's not like how your lifestyle is set up. Both of you, if you're married and both of you work 9 to 5, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty challenging, especially if you have little kids. But this is something a decade in the making for us to get to this point. But I think if you want it bad enough, anybody can do it.
Well, okay, so then here, this will kind of dovetail between that idea of someone who's like, no, you don't understand my circumstances. I want to homeschool too, but you don't understand X, Y, and Z, which makes you human, right? Not crazy. But then another question that someone asked is, how did you actually make your RV travels possible? And I think that my like quick answer on both of those, right? Because you and I were even presented yet again, every year we revisit our homeschool schedule, right? And I looked at you and I went, I don't know that I can do all of this year. Like I'm doubling down on my work. We just had our 5th baby, but I want to have this priority. And you looked at me and you said, don't think about like if it's possible. And I remember where we were standing, we were in the garage, and you looked at me and you said, how is this possible? That question really that has come from you truly in this last decade in my life has opened up possibilities that I don't think I would have ever thought of from that angle, because most of us are thinking about, well, it's not possible and I don't know how to make that possible and it won't work. And when you were like, well, Julia, how could it be possible if those are all your priorities and you're not willing to scrap, like, how could it be possible? And what it caused me to do is, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Like, I don't know.
And I think that's when we got
that's when we got help. Yeah, we basically said, okay, I don't really enjoy these subjects anyways, so what if I could actually bring someone in to do those baselines so I could do the Bible and history and science and values and, all the things that I love. You could do the things that you loved. And I think that, so that kind of answers that. But I think that's ultimately what, when I think about the RV and how did we make that possible, that would also be my answer.
Yeah, 100%. And there again, it comes back to when you were saying that, it's like every result that you see externally was weeks, months, or years prior the decision and the rethinking of like, okay, like how can I? So we don't have that, or we're not there yet with our kids, but how can we position ourselves to be there?
100%.
Same thing with the RV. It was like, okay, we know that we want to do this and we want to do it sooner than later. So how do we position ourselves to be able to do this?
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting at people at the starting line is when they look at you like, oh, must be nice to be you. You had all the money in the world to go buy the best, and then you're all of a sudden you're like, it actually wasn't as hard or expensive or life-altering to make it happen. I think it just took the ability to go, we wanted enough to now actually go, okay, these things seem like roadblocks. This seems like an obstacle. Okay, great. All that's fair, right? Because at the time we had 3 kids, which now sounds easy. But then 3 kids were like, how do we do this with 3 kids?
Did we only have 3? Well, the first time we did it twice,
2.
and I don't want to get in the weeds with that. But the first we did it with 2.
Yeah.
And then we did it, I thought was it 3
No, it was
or
3.
4?
It was 3.
It was 3?
But it was so funny because
wow.
back then we were like, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to do this with 3 kids? And now with 5, I look back and I'm like, oh, silly.
Well, then we did, real quick, we did the travel for 4 to 6 weeks, and we did the VRBO. So we packed up a 5
4
by 10.
children.
Yeah, with 4 children. So we like progressed and grew.
We did.
Children-wise and then space-wise as we traveled, because it got a little bit bigger as we went.
So let's actually answer that question then, right? Because I think that it is a stickier topic now, right? Like people wanting to travel in an RV and see the world, whether they're single or family or all that. But the big question is, how did you actually make that possible?
Well, there again, I'm going to come back to like weeks, years ahead of time. I mean, I think it was always on my heart, and we talked about it because before we even got married, like right before we got married, we went down and we put on hold an RV. No kids. Like we
should have done it then. It would have been so much easier.
We had a little bit of money saved up and we were going to do that. And then we kind of went down a different path, but it was like, so that was like, you know, before Malachi was born, I mean, that was 6-7 years prior to Malachi being born. Mm-hmm. And then another couple years went by and we had Aslan. And then it was like, we got to that point at our house, we had kind of everything, you know, the house and the cars, and we had a somewhat of a good flow with our business and what we were doing. And it was like, there's got to be more. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to just keep going down this road because we were saying, well, when we get there, then we'll do it.
Yep.
Well, then we got there and then it was like, when we get there, then we'll do it. And we both woke up and it was like, no.
Okay, so let's pause there because I think that a lot of times, right, we're calling this the RV. Some people are like, dear God, that sounds like a nightmare. Great, fill in the blank, whatever yours would be, mm-hmm. right? So, but if we're thinking specifically about the RV, I feel like that's what a lot of us do is we sell ourselves this bill of goods that says, well, when I get there, when I have enough money in the bank, when my kids are older, when I have fewer kids, we just like kind of stack it. Well, when I...
Excuses. We come up with these excuses and there again, you don't understand. I mean, if you're saying that to yourself, really... like process that and sit with it, because what limitations are you setting for yourself? If you look at someone else and must be nice, you're blaming your situation, which is a direct correlation to all your actions that brought you to where you're at. Mm-hmm. So you've got to back up. Yes, I understand outside circumstance, outside things happen, and it's also how you deal with it. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, that's every decision we've had. I mean, we could do probably a series of podcasts of all the things that went wrong while we traveled and leading up to it. So it wasn't like this is amazing and, you know, like being out on the road, and there were so many good things that came out of it, but it was hard.
Yeah.
It's not as sexy as, you know, you see maybe some people that have the YouTube channels and they put things like, there's some interesting times that we had.
You learn quick in an RV why you don't make spaghetti. Just put it that way. Gosh. No, but so I think what's interesting about that idea is that, okay, if we set up, okay, here's what I really want. I think part of it you have to go, do you really want it that bad?
Mm-hmm. Right? Or you like the idea.
You like the idea. And we sat there. I remember the last time that we finally were like, all right, we're either going to do this or we're never talking about it again. Because the amount of energy and this hopeful wanting and desiring and hanging the carrot, like we did that too, so guilty here. And I remember us finally just looking at each other and going, all right, it either stops here and we never talk about it again because we actually don't want it that bad, mm-hmm. or we're going to lean in and we got to want it. And then that's where I remember the next step started to look like, okay, how can we do this? And that's where I think you're crazy resourceful. So I think that this is a skill that you've learned, or God put it on the inside of you, and really I don't care because I benefit either way. But then all of a sudden you started looking at and mapping out, how much things cost and where we could go and what it would look like and how the structure would look and here's what we could do. And it was like, you almost get this whiteboard of here's all the different ways that we could do this, right? And some were a little bit more expensive, some weren't as expensive, some were super glamorous, some weren't. And it was like there was pros and cons to every potential strategy, right? Even when we were looking at the make and the model and the location and where we went first and if we sold everything, if we kept everything, right? If we put it in storage, it's this amount. Do we care that much about our stuff? Like it just opened up what I think a lot of people start to feel overwhelmed, but you're like, that's your journey to freedom, right? Like map that sucker out to go, ooh, I don't like that. I'll choose that hard over that hard. Ooh, that makes more sense. And so when we were up and running at some level, it was kind of like on a monthly cost and all things like same.
Well, and then once we kind of had all that information, I remember coming to you and saying, hey, like, what if we just sold everything? And you're like, everything? Like, no, like literally everything besides, a few personal things that, we can't replace.
I was like, what about my couch? And he looked at me like, yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever said.
We just like bought a bunch of stuff for that house. And it was like 9 months later, 10 months later, it was like, that dream, that desire was not going away. We got a little bit taste with it with 2 kids and traveling for 3 months, but it didn't go away. And that's when we had that conversation. But we also made the commitment. After we got all the information, pros and cons, and we looked at it, and I said, what if we just sold everything? We sold everything before we even had the RV to travel in. I remember that because we sold everything, fire sold it. We did a living estate sale is what we called it. And that's probably a different podcast in itself. But then what we did was packed just the things that we can't replace that mean something to us. And we had like a little U-Haul that we towed behind the car. We brought it back up to Denver and I was still looking for RVs. I found one, flew out to California, bought it, drove it back. And I also remember when you called me, and you tell this story probably better than I do, but when you asked me, how does it feel? Like you're excited, you haven't seen the RV and you're like, how does it feel? And I'm like I've been here before.
It's so anticlimactic, you guys. Now, the principle is amazing. So hold on just a minute. But I remember, and you go, I'm stoked, right? I cannot wait for this thing to pull up. How was it? He says, it's like I've been here before. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? And you had said, I had envisioned this so many times, the visualization around this process so many times that now it just feels normal. Which is the power of visualization right there, right? Like the power of visualization is not just to make you feel good in a moment, it's to prepare your mindset and your heart set and all the things to actually walk out, right? That dream more naturally, because it's like you've emotionally been there so many times that when it happens, it's just a byproduct of really your belief system, which I think is so powerful. But anyway, so I think that to me, once you draw up, it was just kind of like the rest of it. To your point, right? Some days were great and organic and it worked well, and some days didn't, and there was tons of obstacles. But I think the whole idea of how I would answer that question is we just decided that we wanted it enough, and we came at the mindset of how can we do this? Someone else has, like I think automatically put so many limits, like I'm never going to be able to make money and I'm never going to be able to start a business and it's impossible. And you're like, okay, well, first of all, there's a lot of people that make money, a lot of people that start businesses. There's like, so if not them, why not you? Like
100%. And I think, bringing it back to the time you plant the seed is different than when you see the harvest.
Totally.
And that was almost 10 years from the time we went and looked at the RV and we're like, started to talk about the idea, from when we really pressed into it and got the A-class, the big bus, everything that we wanted and that we dreamed of. That was almost 10 years.
So good. So there's one other follow-up question to that is, would you do it again?
Yes.
Now?
Not now, no.
No, that's the
not
question.
Not with 5 kids.
No, that's the question. Would you do it now?
No.
Not like would you go back and do it again. Would you do it again now?
No. not with 5 kids. No.
Here's Gentry style. Been there, done that. Don't need to do it again. I won't drive the same way home again. I won't order the same cup of coffee. Well, you actually do like the same cup of coffee. Travis Gentry doesn't normally like to do things again, but that was a good, interesting question. I would not do it again with 5 children.
No.
No.
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all.
Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
Especially little kids.
Threw the t-shirt away.
Yeah. We'll have to do a podcast specifically on that, because it's like, we've had kids fall out of the RV, like down the metal stairs, and like it was an experience. And I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
Like I am so grateful and glad that we did it in the season of our lives. If we didn't do it, I'm sure we would be talking about it.
Yeah.
But now with that experience, no, I don't wish to relive that at this point.
Okay, so our next question is, why do we have an au pair? And then it was like in parentheses, and just tell me more about someone from another country living in your own home.
Mm-hmm. So I'll jump in on this one. I think for me, and I was just talking with, I think, Aslan about it, but it's like, to me, I value more of quality time than quantity. So for the au pair to be here, I can take 1, 2, or 3 of the kids and go spend quality time. That's what it allows me to do. Having the flexibility, because she is amazing, and we, like, super flexible. So whether it's at nights or weekends.
Let me stop you here though, because I want you to walk back to your first initial, when I first asked you about this though, because this has now been, so to give some context, we've had 2 au pairs, a total of 2.5 years total. So here we are, to even Travis's point, like what we're saying isn't necessarily where we started.
No, but that is why I was like, that makes sense. Because I value, one, we can go on date nights whenever we want, or date days. Having the flexibility of someone that is with us and that lives with us. And then the quality time that I can spend at any given time. Like just a couple of days ago, you come downstairs and Bioletta was there, and you're like, where's Zion? And he's like, oh, Travis took him. Because I went to go have coffee with Zion. He needed a little break. So
he did space.
He's 2 years old.
Here's a 2-year-old that walks around the house just saying, space,
a little,
space.
A little hot chocolate. So that always has been, for me, the flexibility, and for you too, to relieve some of that, because she helps out around the house in different areas, but it allows you to live out your dreams and work too, and not me just saying, putting it on you. And we also take the opportunity too to do school.
Yeah.
So she kind of, whether it's one-on-one time, or it's school time, or it's us time, or it's me time, like she's like our go-to for that. And that's always been my reason why.
I think Travis and I, we could be poster children for why, if you're a family at all that wants to thrive, that I would highly, highly, highly recommend this idea. And for me, I had to walk through a lot of the mom guilt right out of the gate, right? So we had friends in the business that had 2 kids, and she said to me one day, like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do all of this well if I don't get another option. And I had babysitters that come and go and all the things, and so I got to watch them kind of walk through it. But I think for me, I had to walk through again all of those shoulds of like, well, I should be there all the time, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing that, and I was shoulding myself so much that it was like, now I'm with the kids and I should be working, and I'm working and I should be with the kids, and it just got to be exhausting. So for me, I think I had to go back to, okay, what is it that in this right next season of our life that I want the most? And I got to work backwards, because I get to choose, right? Like I could ultimately be, and I remember you saying this, like, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, great. Like we will build our lives around that, right? Like if you want to go more all in with work, great. We will build our lives around that. And it was just this open invitation yet again to go, okay, what do we want and how do we make this happen? And then I remember the conversation with you of like, well, what is it going to be like to have another woman in our house, because they live as an au pair, they live with us, right? We pay for their room and board, we pay for their food. They spend their life with us. And I remember that conversation with you of like, well, we want this to be another family member, like, yes, of course they're going to work for us, but we want to find someone who has the same mindset and desires, and right, someone that we can connect with, that our kids more importantly can connect with, that can ultimately be family. So I'm just curious from you, from a guy dad perspective, what did it feel like to have another woman from another country, in your home all the time?
It's only awkward if you want it to be awkward. It's only awkward.
Travis walks around his underwear all the time.
If you want it to be awkward.
He says all the time.
Now she's used to me walking around in my underwear.
That's right. Like, she even said today, did you shower yet today, Travis?
Well, I was joking around with her because I was like, Violetta, literally, I haven't showered in like 3 days. Like, I've just been working, then I worked out, and I played with the kids, and I go to bed, and like, it's just been...
Then
so
she said, then she threw me under the bus, and she goes, well, who's been longer since they've taken a shower, you or Julia? I was like, I can hear you.
For sure, Julia.
I'm upstairs, but I can hear you.
No, at first, yeah, the thought of, okay, there again, it's kind of this process of pros and cons. Everything that we do, we look at worst case, best case
Yep.
scenario, and we look at those, and then we evaluate it, and knowing that some of those may show up, but do they outweigh the pros of it? And if we move forward with it, then the answer is no. And so at first, because we've had two, like you said, and the first one that we had, everything is new.
Yeah.
The second one, it gets a little bit easier. You can kind of communicate up front certain things, that expectations and how we roll and what we like and don't like. And so the process gets easier.
Yeah.
And then themselves, it's like you just treat them as one of the family.
Which I have loved. And then there was a piece of me sometimes that was like, oh my gosh, my kid's going to love her more than me. And, just all the weird things that we do. And I think that it has really affirmed my role as a mom. And I've gotten to watch my kids fall in love and build a relationship with someone else, right? Because it's provided just an opportunity for you and I to coach them around how to communicate to another leader. Like, again, back to our reasons that we homeschool, is that it's given us just the ability to teach them about how to build a relationship with someone and how to use their words. And, then we get to teach, Violetta, it's been incredible just to teach her about how we think about life and marriage and money. And I mean, we've had so many cool conversations with her just around a totally different culture. Like, she died the first time that I put Zion in a crib in his own room. She looked at me like, well, where is he? And I was like, he's up in his room in his bed. And, because culturally they all sleep together, like in the same room. And like, that was unheard of, and
Yeah.
so I also love just like that cultural exchange,
Yeah.
that we've gotten to see, and then to watch our kids truly build a relationship with someone that I think even for like a Violetta, she'll be in our life forever.
Well, yeah, and she got engaged like a few months ago. Julia's marrying them, and I haven't been asked yet, but I think I'm going to be asked to walk her down the aisle. So it's just so cool to be a part of that process. And the guy that she's marrying is just such a great guy to her. So what a blessing for her to come here, be a part of our family, serve our family, and she meets someone that she can spend the rest of her life with.
And then again, super tactically speaking, I think for all of us who are like, oh my gosh, I could never afford something like this. And then we just stop, right? Like, we don't do any additional thinking or calculating. For Travis and I think that we immediately went, all right, we're going to need a nanny of some sort. So let's just calculate, what does that cost, right? And how does that look? And then we reached out to a couple agencies. We found the one that we like. We did crunch the numbers. And at the end of the day, right, at the end of the year, when we look at the amount of the amount of money that it's going to take, part-time nanny versus a full-time au pair, when we pay for room and board and the agency fee and her fee, it was almost exactly the same amount. And so that, again, just leaning into that thing of, I don't know that we could ever afford it. Well, you don't not know, right? And then how could you afford it? But first you got to know what it even costs. And so it just all of a sudden made all the sense in the world, because now the grandmas could be grandmas, right? It was like this, like, just pick them up because you want to, not because we're like, hey, can you get our kids for one more thing? It has allowed us the freedom. Like, it just made sense financially on paper. It just, to me, at some level, you were like, all the boxes were like, check, 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 check.
Yep. And I said it on the last podcast, but it's so true. If you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're right. And that's where the self-limitations of not even starting down and looking at pros and cons and costs or whatever that looks like, to make the decision, an educated decision of like, oh, it actually really is not as bad as we thought. Whether it's traveling an RV, whether it's, having an au pair live with us, it weighed out to be about the same, but the benefits that we got from it far exceed.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question today on this episode today. The question is, how do you support each other's dreams? And there was a little bit of some follow-up conversation with one of these members of the group, because I said, can you be more specific? And they said it just sometimes feels really hard to be in a marriage with someone that you're both chasing the dreams at the same time, that it doesn't pull you apart, or that you know how to support each other, or what if they don't get your dream or you don't get their dream? And so you could tell that it was very like, not a somber question, but you could tell that there was a little bit of like, I don't know how to make this happen in my marriage. So what is our mindset around how we support each other in our own dreams?
I mean, it's interesting that it goes back to, and you didn't tell me exactly what questions that we were going to talk about. And so, but we've taken that process through this as well. We looked at all the pros and cons as far as like when you're doing, you've been in this kind of coaching and consulting for quite some time. You've transitioned to other things, but every time you do that, we look at it and say, what are all the costs? What are the pros and cons? What's the ramp time? What does that look like? How much energy and effort is that going to take you? Because it can adjust. And right now you're working more than you have because you're trying to adjust and shift your business. So knowing that, but it's not a forever thing. It's a season or a time of like, okay, once I can get these things off my plate, it's actually going to free up way more time, and I'm going to do the things that I love, and I'm going to have a bigger impact than what I have been, because it's exhausting.
So let's say the person though that's sitting here goes, okay, no, I hear you, but what if your spouse like isn't in on your dream? Like, what if there is the, no, I've laid all that out. I've even tried to express it, and I'm just going to give an example. They have a full-time job, right? They aren't dreaming. They feel like they're avoiding the conversation. And every time I bring up my dreams, they just kind of shut it down, right? They downplay it. They don't even want to engage in that conversation, right? Like, what do you do when you actually feel like you're in a relationship with someone that doesn't buy in?
So you need to read, or have your spouse read, Dream I Dare You.
Yes.
And you both need to go through this and buy the workbook and go through it and talk about everything. And there again, it comes back to communication and understanding why you do what you do. And it's going to open up some can of worms, peel back some onions. But I think it's going to be...
We got to talk about that.
It's going to help both sides, because if one person, we've seen it, doesn't love what they're doing, they're mentally, physically just exhausted, for them to say, yeah, you go live your dream. Yeah, you do that and we'll have less money, but you're going to go like on this dream kind of, whatever you want to call it, experiment thing. Like, go for it. And so I think, but if the person and you both can talk and say, okay, like, be real with it, of like, I don't love what I'm doing. I would like to do something different too.
Yeah.
So how do we both come together? And there may be a season, okay, I know I'm gonna hold the fort down financially, or I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing to allow you. There's gonna be checks and balances. Let's look at all the costs and pros and cons and time frame. And then once you get to this point, then it'll allow me to do the same thing.
And then I think sometimes it's asking the most obvious questions, because I think that we go, well, they're not supporting me. I was actually just talking with a client yesterday, right? That's this couple. And she says, well, I just don't feel like he's supporting me. And I said, okay, great. What would support look like? And she literally pauses, almost like, I'll kill you, Julia. Because she wanted me to go, okay, bro, like, what are you doing to not support her? But I just said, okay, great. I'm going to get to him in a second. And I just looked at her and said, so what would support look like?
Oh, they were both on
They were both on the call.
Okay.
And she stares at me. I kid you not, it was the most awkward 25 seconds. And she goes, I have no idea. And I said, honey bunny, that's on you. That's not on him. Right? Like, at some level, we're wanting someone to give us probably support and validation and affirmation that our dreams are real and right and all those things. And even for you, when I've come to you with some of my dreams, because you are so tactical and extremely practical, you're asking me clarifying questions, because in your mind, you're like, all right, how do we get this thing done? But I've always, not always, up until, I would say maybe this last year or two, I've always felt like that was, you don't believe in my dreams, and so I'll just kind of shut down. What I want is just sometimes the space and the freedom to go, hey, Trav, I'm just about ready to share something that feels more vulnerable. I don't actually know if it's a dream or an idea. Like, I'm literally talking to the elephant in the room. I'm like, will you just like listen to me without doing anything, right? Or I'll come back and go, okay, I'm ready for you to like rapid fire questions, because depending on where you're at in the dreaming process, if I have not actually gotten clear on what it is, I just have this idea. If someone comes at you with all of these questions, it can feel like I'm not supported and that's not enough and I'll never get there and all the things. And so I think that some of it is also on us. It's not always, well, the other person, if they would just believe in me and if they would just buy into my dreams. No, what does support look like to you? And how can you engage in this conversation with, your, I'm just going to talk marriage specifically, but right, your champion, your best friend, to go, here's what support might look like for me. Right? Because I think I've even said to you a couple times, you said, what's support look like? And I'm like, let me cry without tapping out. Like, let me come to you and say, I'm exhausted. And instead of going, well, you're doing the wrong thing or quit or it's over, like, just let me maybe cry, get it out, remind me why I'm doing this, pat me in the butt and send me on my way. You know, like, so I think that just asking ourselves, what would support look like as I'm, pursuing my dream is an important answer to be able to give your spouse.
Yeah, and here's what we have done too, and take a 3 kind of part approach to it. One is if you have the dream and you position it with your spouse to say, look, I've been really thinking about this idea and this dream and I want to do this or whatever it is, and just say, here's how I want to communicate this to you. And I want you just to process it. I don't want you to ask questions. I don't want you to give me pros and cons or anything off the cuff. I want you just to take in I want to verbally throw up on you and just sit there, please. And then I want you to come back. We'll meet in a day, a week, whatever that looks like. I want you to come back with questions to get clarification, to understanding.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take that because I may not know all of them and it may help me to look at it from a different way.
Yep.
And then we're going to come back a 3rd time and then have a conversation where both parties are actually engaged in the conversation.
Yeah.
So the first 2 conversations are the first conversation, you're speaking. Second conversation, they're speaking. Third conversation, you're both speaking.
You guys are so good. I'm going to write that in the show notes. So in case you forget that simple, stupid, hard formula, it's going to be there for you. So good. I think that's so incredible. And it's so honoring of both parties, right? Because especially if you're not used to this dreaming conversation, which you and I are, right? Intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, we love it. Travis is always like, I have a new idea. I'm like, yeah, let's go, right? But I think that to the people who are not comfortable and haven't done the book and the practice of all those things, I think that what it does is that it honors me if I'm the person getting to share my heart, right? Then it honors you as a person that's like, whoa, okay, like maybe like, oh my gosh, this might change my life. And this, like, I think that there is a level like of honoring you of like, here's just all my questions, good, bad, and different, concerns, fears, hopes, dreams too. And then I think it honors both to be able to be like, all right, how do we partner together in this to see this dream through?
Or what's the next step? There again, we don't have all the information. Now we've kind of thrown it out there as pros and cons, but we don't have the next. Now we know the next step. And here's the next step. We need to look at financially. We need to look at, what does that look like time frame wise? Like, are you saying you want to do this next week or next month or next year?
Like yesterday?
Yeah, like we've got to map that out. So anything's possible, but you just have to put a realistic time frame on it.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, and encourage again the book, is I think sometimes what we also don't realize is in that process of if I'm sharing my dreams and I don't know that your limiting belief is right, I can't have what I want. And this is really what we struggled with for years is you had this limiting belief of I can't have what I want. So here I come with, I want all these things. And in the back of your mind, it was a little bit of this unconscious resentment because you're like, great, we're going to help you get
what you want,
but I can't have what I want. So I was running into your like, sure, like, the little bit of this hesitation or this negativity or this care but don't care. And then when you would come to me, right, I have this whole idea that I'm not as good as you think I am and you're going to reject me. So I have this plan, but if I don't do it the right way, and I would get back in the box. So I'd see you dreaming outside of the box and I was like, where's the box? Because if I do this and make a mistake, Trav's going to reject me as a human, right? And so it was like for years we were playing up against our own limiting beliefs. And so I think that understanding that and what you might be running up against is so invaluable.
Yes.
Right? So you should read this book. You. And I don't mean Travis, I mean
I
you.
helped write it.
Travis even says
part of my life. It's part of my life. I don't know why my name didn't get put on the bottom.
Because you didn't put any words on paper.
Co-authors.
Oh man, well we hope that this just kind of breaks down some minor and major questions and topics that helps you continue to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be.
Until next time, we appreciate you, we thank you, and dream on.